Our guest today is Jack Canfield, the originator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. He alone fostered the emergence of inspirational anthologies as a genre and watched it grow to a billion-dollar market. As the driving force behind the development and delivery of more than 123 million books sold through the Chicken Soup for the Soul franchise and over 500 million copies in print worldwide, Jack Canfield is uniquely qualified to talk about success. So let's welcome Jack to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Well, Time Magazine called you the publishing phenomenon of the decade. Tell our audience more about this.
Well, basically what happened is I was running workshops and trainings all around the country, primarily for educators at that time. Now it's more for the general public and corporations. But I was using a lot of stories to illustrate my points. And one day somebody said, "That story you told about the Girl Scouts, is that in a book anywhere?" And the next day someone would say, "That story you told about the puppy, is that in a book anywhere?" This happened every day for about 2 weeks in a row. And it was as if the universe was knocking on my forehead saying, "Put these stories in a book." So I literally made a list on a plane flight home from Boston to L.A., where I was living at the time, of about 70 stories that I was telling, the dog story, the Oscar story, the whatever. And I thought, well, if I write 2 stories a week, at the end of the year I'm going to have a book. And, we'll have 100 stories. That'll be a great book. And I had no title for it. I just started doing that. And that book ultimately became Chicken Soup for the Soul. And as most people don't know, that book was rejected by 144 publishers over the course of 18 months. So basically it was not an overnight success that way. But eventually we got a publisher, and it took about, I could say 14 months until we made a bestseller list. And then it stayed on the New York Times list for 3 years, which then led to our publisher saying, let's do a follow-up book. And to make a long story short, there's now 227 titles in that series of Chicken Soup for the Soul books. It's been translated into many, over 40 languages around the world. And the first Chicken Soup book in America sold 10 million copies. And by 1998, I think it was May 24th, we won a Guinness Book World Record for having 7 books on the New York Times bestseller list on the same day. And now, as you said, over 500 million copies sold, and 47 of our 227 books have been on the New York Times list. And so it basically was a phenomenon. No one had ever seen anything like that. And the final part of that is that when we went, and the reason we got rejected so much by all the people in New York is that people didn't believe that collections of short stories would sell. And up until then, collections of short stories were all literary short stories. They were fiction. And they didn't sell that well. And this was the first collection of, inspirational stories that were all true. And it really started a new genre. And there's lots of now series of books. You see them all the time of people coming up with, 50 stories about this, that, the other thing. So it really was a phenomenon, and it's been a wonderful journey for Mark Victor Hansen and I, who co-authored the books.
I think that's great. I know a lot of people just love reading stories. They love reading about other people. And for me, you did me such a favor because I have vision difficulties, and you came out with big print. And I really appreciate that. A lot of books, the only books you used to be able to get are Reader's Digest big print. You could never get any books in big print.
Well, you know what inspired that? My father was losing his eyesight, and so out of a desire to have him read my books, we convinced our publisher to do a lot of them in the big print versions.
Well, you helped me out too, so thank you very much. You are also known as America's #1 success coach. What do you think sets you apart from others who call themselves quote coaches?
Well, I think there are a lot of coaches out there today. A lot of people going to coach school and taking life executive coaching and all this kind of stuff. And I think a couple of things set me apart. One is my life purpose is to inspire and empower people to live their highest vision in the context of love and joy. And so the stories I tell are inspirational. That's what the Chicken Soup stories are. The empowerment part comes from my having spent over 40 years learning tools and techniques and interventions and processes that help people become empowered to break through their limiting beliefs. And, what happened for me was I was very fortunate that I did a lot of training first as a therapist. I was a Gestalt therapist for many years, and I studied something called psychosynthesis, which is a spiritual approach to coaching and therapy. And so I have a holistic approach that involves the body, the mind, the emotions, the imagination, the intuition, what I call will and choice, our center of awareness, and our spiritual self. And most coaches don't have that broad a approach or that broad a background that allows them to do that. I think the other thing is because of my book, The Success Principles, which has 64 principles of success in it, that I have a system that literally is an integrated system that will produce consistent results in your life over time. And so rather than someone coming in and saying, I'm stuck, or I've got a problem, what I'm really looking at is not so much solving a problem, but evolving them to the full expression of themselves. So we go in and look at what is your life purpose, what is your soul wanting to manifest in this life that you're currently living in, and that's identifiable. Then create a vision for how to do that, and then set particular goals, and get it very, very specific, and then work with any belief systems that may be in the way of that, and then help people get into action. How do you motivate yourself to act, stay in action when you reach objectives and I should say objections, and when you reach obstacles, and when you have failure, and all of that, and how to push yourself through that and keep yourself inspired, and then how to respond to feedback, how to persevere. So there's a lot of steps to this system that is a holistic system, and I think most coaches just don't have that level of background. You and I were talking before we got on, and we're both 70 years old. So, some coach who's 23 years old, they can actually help a lot of people, but they just don't have the life skills and the life wisdom of somebody, like me that's been doing it for as long as I have. I think finally, the thing that, sets me apart is it's the energy that I bring to it. I really believe our beingness, who we are, is as important as what we say and what we do. Just yesterday, I was running a workshop for about 150 people in Philadelphia, all of them authors or aspiring authors, and I was running a workshop on how to be a best-selling author. And at the end of the day, this woman came up to me and she said, when I came in here, I wasn't sure I could be an author. I'm trying to write a book, but it's hard, as you all know. And she said, you taught us so many things that we need to do to be a best-selling author. I would have thought I would have been overwhelmed because there's so many things, so much work. She said, but I'm sitting here in this deep place of peace, just believing that I can do it. And I think there's something about the energy of my confidence of what I've done in life, that just that energy alone is transformative, such that people transform out of the interaction with my energy as well as what words I say.
I definitely agree. I know as a coach myself and now a mentor for many, many years, I have come from the same place as you do, from that deep place of peace, and everybody's different. So you can't coach everybody the same way. And I think that's the difference between a 23-year-old and a 70-year-old as far as teaching people how to become a better person and to enjoy their life more.
Yeah, it's true. When you're younger, you usually have one method or one system or one technique. And then as you get older, you try on more things. You keep the ones that work. And eventually, I always say the reason most wise people have gray hair is it takes a while.
They earned them. Well, mine is red, and that's from a bottle, and I don't care because you can't be showing that. Otherwise, you don't look good anymore. So that is my style.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there are mixed reviews about education playing an integral role in business. We both have PhDs. You're a Harvard graduate. Do you think your education helped you to surpass many other people who teach this peak performance?
Well, I think education has helped me. I'm not so sure my Harvard education helped me. I majored in Chinese history, if you can believe that. And I thought I was going to go in the State Department and do diplomacy, and my grandfather had been an assistant ambassador to Germany after World War I, and it just seemed like that's what my parents wanted me to do, to become a lawyer and get in the government. And so, I think it helped me learn to defer gratification, to study, to realize that there's a lot of depth to things that you need to learn to know. But I think it probably helped build my self-esteem. Just the fact that I got into Harvard, that was kind of miraculous to me, given I came from West Virginia. And I always say I graduated from the half of the class at Harvard that made the top half possible. So basically, I was not I'm smart, but I'm not as smart as some people I know. But what really shifted for me was the education I started to get when I got to Chicago. When I was at Harvard, I took an elective class in it was called social relations, and it was basically psychology and how people interact, and I fell in love with that. And so I decided I wanted to get into that, and I ended up at the University of Chicago studying education. So I taught in an all-black inner-city high school for a number of years, and I became more interested in why my kids weren't motivated than in teaching history. And so that led me to start learning how do you motivate unmotivated people. and I met this man named W. Clement Stone, who was a self-made multimillionaire worth about $600 million. He was a friend of Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, and was probably one of the first people that really kind of talked about the law of attraction. And so that was the beginning of my education. And then from there, I went back to the University of Massachusetts, where I worked on a doctorate degree, and I studied psychological education. So now I was kind of in the field I wanted to be studying in. And then after I graduated, I remember the first year after I graduated, I took 38 weekend workshops, things on therapy and yoga and meditation and whatever. So I've always been very, very committed to learning more. And I have a chapter in my book, The Success Principles, that says to learn more, earn more. I mean, to earn more, you got to learn more. And so basically, I got divorced about 20 years ago. We had to separate our libraries. I had over 3,000 books. I had to count them because the lawyer said so. And I'd read over 3,000 books. And so I think education is critical. The more you know, the more you can do. And unfortunately, if you don't know a lot, you don't have a lot to offer.
That's a great way of putting it. I think continuous education is just, you have to have it. I'm constantly learning, going to seminars, listening to webinars, doing whatever it takes for me to not be a 70-year-old person who no longer is learning. I do think that the continuous learning does teach you things about life, because there's so much more to being an author, a bestseller, or any of that stuff than you got to have that self-esteem. There's so much more than just writing a book. You got to have so much knowledge about the world, and you know that. So good for you.
It's so true. I literally got an email from a woman about a week ago. She's 80 years old, and she said, I found your video on YouTube. I have a video there on Dream Big.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
She said, I have a lot of videos there. So
yes,
she said, I started watching that, and now every day I spend 2 hours a day watching videos on YouTube, watching TED Talks, listening to audio tapes when I drive my car. This is an 80-year-old woman. And so it really is. It's the commitment to the word you use, lifelong learning, and you have to constantly be learning because the world's constantly changing. And so we need to evolve along with it.
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but I'm going to be a centenarian. So I have a lot to learn.
Yep.
I'm not done learning yet.
That's true.
Well, you have developed a proven formula for success, and have reached global acclaim with your national bestseller, The Success Principles, that we've been talking about, how to get from where you are to where you want to be. If you were to leave our audience with just one principle, what would it be and why?
Well, that's the one question I hate more than anything on the planet.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You're allowed to ask it because I have a good answer.
Good.
But I'll tell you why I don't like it. And that is, I always tell people, if you could only keep one organ in your body, which one would you pick? And if you keep your heart, it would be no oxygen, you'd have no lungs. If you only kept your brain would die, there'd be no blood pumping to it. So basically, I think you have to have an integrated system for success, and that's why I wrote my book, The Success Principles, and put everything I knew. I said, if you were going to go to one-stop shopping for everything you'd need to know to be a success. Now, obviously, there's lots of information. If you're going to be a real estate agent, you have to know about real estate. But if you wanted to know just the principles of success, I wanted to write the book that if you only read that one book, you'd have what you need to know. And so it really is a system, Joyce, and I think you know that too, that you can't just set goals, you have to take action. You can't just visualize, you have to do something. You can't just take action, you have to respond to feedback and so forth. So basically, there's about 64 principles in the book, and 25 of them I think are really critical. And one of them is take 100% responsibility for your life, because if you don't start by taking 100% responsibility, giving up blaming and complaining, you're going to believe you're a victim, and so you don't really think you're in charge of your life. You don't realize that the thoughts you think, the behaviors you do, the things you say, the actions you take or don't take are what create your future. And I always tell people who you are today is a result of the thoughts you thought, the actions you took, the decisions you made in the past. And so if you want your life to be different, you have to think different, act different, visualize different, do different, etc. But really this whole system that I kind of mentioned earlier about coming up with getting clear, what is it you want? What's your vision for your ideal life? What is your life purpose? So Stephen Covey said you don't want to get to the top of the ladder and realize the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. And so if you're not aligned with your essential purpose in life, what you're really here to do, which we're guided by our inner experience of joy, we're guided by the talents that we've been given. I'm not very mechanically inclined or mathematically inclined, nor do I desire to be so. Whereas my son-in-law who is really good at these kinds of, he works as a financial analyst, and so he loves that world. I have no desire to do that, but
not my world either. Don't like that world. Yeah.
So we each have a purpose that we're here to do, and I think if we each do that, then the world works because all the needs get fulfilled. But I would say, if people really want one secret to success, and this will sound self-serving, I don't mean it to be, but I would really get a copy of my book, The Success Principles, and read it. I'll just give you one example of what happened for one person. I was in Manila in the Philippines giving a workshop about 5 years ago, and a man came to a book signing I did the night before, and he said, he interviewed me, and it was a fabulous interview. And I said, John, that was the best interview I've had, I think, ever. How long have you been doing this? He said, you're my first interview. I said, get out of here. I said, how's that possible? He said, well, I just lost my job. He was running a restaurant, and it went bankrupt, and he was couch surfing, meaning he was sleeping in other friends' apartments.
Right.
He had a friend drop him off and was going to pick him up because he had to sell his car just for money. He had $3.28 to his name. I gave him $20 of my own money just to buy dinner. I bought him a copy of my book from the bookstore because I had to give him a copy of my book. And then I invited him to attend my seminar the next day. He came back to my next seminar, which was 2 years later. I came back to Manila, and he walks in a beautiful suit with a logo on his breast pocket, and about 5 or 10 people following behind him, all dressed in these polo shirts with the same logo on their shirt. And it turns out, I said, John, you're the guy that interviewed me. He said, yeah, I'm now the #1 motivational speaker in the Philippines. I made over $1 million last year. I have 2 homes, a boat, a house, cars. He was thinking about buying an airplane. He had a radio show and a TV show. He was doing really, really well. I said, John, what happened? He said, I read your book. I decided I was going to do everything you said for 1 year. You were successful. I wasn't. I was going to do everything, not question anything, not say this is stupid. And he said, because of that, I am now teaching these same principles now in the Philippines, and I'm one of the most successful people in the country. So that's the possibility. If you want to really take your life to the next level, I would just encourage people to do that.
That's a great story, and it's not self-serving at all, because people need to know that they just can't talk about something. People talk about what they're going to do, and then they don't do it. Mm-hmm. So the saying I always use, if it is to be, it's up to me.
That's a good statement. That's, I think, what Jim Rohn taught me that statement.
Yes, and I think it's probably from him. I didn't know where it came from, but thank you for telling me, because it really is up to you, and people think for some reason that they're entitled to some type of success, or they don't have to work as hard as we do. I know for a fact that you work 24/7. I know I do.
I do, and I think the reason we do and we can get away with it is because we love what we do. If you're doing something you hate, then you don't want to work 24/7.
We don't need to run away by taking a vacation.
That's right.
We're having our vacation every single minute of the day.
That's right. I think it was Thomas Edison said, when your vocation becomes a vacation, you have made it. And that's how I feel about mine.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm sure our listeners will want to learn more about you and what you do. Tell us how people can reach your wonderful resources.
Well, basically, I have a couple of websites. The main one is just jackcanfield.com, JACKCAN as in Nelly, FIELD.com. And everything I do, all my seminars, the books, the audio programs, the home study programs, our train-the-trainer programs, our Breakthrough to Success seminar, all of that stuff is there. And you can also, if you're interested in training, you just go trainwithjack.com. And there's that. And then there's also the successprinciples.com that has a lot of free resources that people can use to help them work through the book.
Well, thank you, Jack, for being our guest today on Image Maker Media, and I really enjoyed talking with you.
Well, it's my pleasure, Joyce. It's fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you.